How's it going, everyone? And welcome to the Bot Podcast, where we interview movers, shakers, and innovators and talk all things conversational user interfaces. I'm your host, Chad Oda, and today we have a very special guest, Ofer Ronen. Ofer is the general manager of Google's Chatbase analytics platform. Chatbase is a cross-platform plug-and-play service that helps chatbot developers accelerate finding product market fit by providing key bot metrics and workflows for fixing bots. Ofer also serves as an advisor and investor for various startup companies such as Palantir, Lyft, and Clout, to name a few. So at that, Ofer, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, it's good to be here.
Absolutely. It was just great seeing you at the Tel Aviv Chatbot Summit at the end of January, and I know you're going to be speaking next month as a keynote speaker. So that's coming up quite rapidly. So if people didn't know that, make sure to check Ofer out in Berlin next month.
Yeah, that'll be great.
So rolling into some questions here, specifically about Chatbase. So maybe tell me a little bit about the specific customer need or market opportunity that you see Chatbase sort of fitting into the marketplace right now.
Yeah, sure, Chad. So we initially focused on virtual agent analytics. The idea was once you had your virtual agent in production, that we would help you make it better by seeing what are the experiences that work and don't work with live customers. Since then, we've come out with a second product that we're very excited about called Virtual Agent Modeling. And the idea there, and this came out of like working with them, with a lot of bot developers and understanding their top problems. So with this new product, we actually look at historical conversations between customers and live agents in order to know how to model your virtual agent. So it's like a data-driven or more correctly data-informed way to build a bot, and we're finding that it's working really well.
Very cool, very cool. Was it like what was being demoed in Tel Aviv earlier this year, or was it sort of something more advanced at this point?
So we didn't yet talk about when we were in Tel Aviv, but we will in Berlin.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, but it's currently an early access program, so a new service. And it's focused primarily on contact center bots, so support kind of bots, because that's where there's a lot of historical conversations that you can tap into to make your bot smarter, faster.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they just have like so much data, oftentimes it's like, how do we properly leverage that conversational data if it does exist, right? So it makes complete sense. So sort of going back a little bit to the beginning here, I was taking a look at your LinkedIn profile, and it looks like you sort of have a background in sort of analytics platforms. It looked like you had previously sold one to Google. So sort of fast forward to today with Chatbase, how did you initially get interested, sort of involved in the chatbot and voice space, specifically with analytics?
Yeah, so I called Chatbase my fifth startup. So I've done a number, and they all were B2B kind of startups. And yeah, the one before this one was also analytics. I've, for the last 9 years now, I've been an angel investor in startups. And so I meet regularly with entrepreneurs, and I try to like mentor them when I can. And what I started seeing by now, it's like 3 years ago, maybe.
Yeah.
I saw people talking about bots, like all kinds of bot startups. And I initially dismissed them. And this is before like some of the bot platforms came out, and it was before the industry really took off. But I thought that if bots will become a way to deliver services, that there's a lot of opportunities around building tools for the bot developers. That was like greenfield. And I could look back to the previous generation, which was apps that came after sites. And each time there's a new generation of like ways of delivering services, a crop of new tools companies comes out. And I realized, I'm at Google, and analytics is a common thing at Google. That Google's known for that, and so that's where like I realized that doing analytics for bots made sense, given where I was.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. Makes a ton of sense. So like, what was like the sort of introduction into moving into bots, specifically for you? Was that sort of like, something to sort of wrap your head around, or was it something that you were already, a bunch of startups you were already talking to were sort of had their
Yeah.
hands in some of these projects, or?
Yeah, it wasn't obvious what is the right kind of problems that you want to solve for bot developers, and what are the challenges that they have. And so it required talking to entrepreneurial folks that I trusted that were building bot companies to understand what are they like doing to be to move their projects forward. And what I learned was that they had to like build tools themselves.
Yeah.
And that's a good sign that there's an opportunity when people are like building tools that are not core to their business in order to just like move it forward. That's an opportunity. And so I learned about these issues of not handled experiences where like the bot conversations can be so open-ended, and how does a developer, how are they expected to like understand the users across a lot of different kinds of questions. And so that's how that insight came, just from talking to people, and I realized that it's not just about analytics, but it's about optimization, that you need to help people fix these open-ended experiences.
Yeah, definitely. I think especially in call centers, I think that's where, at least I'm primarily seeing a lot of these sort of more intelligent bots, NLP, NLU oriented bots, targeting call centers, because it's just like, oftentimes you don't know what the customer is going to ask, right? We're trying to optimize for a level of efficiency there,
Yeah.
so I can see how, the analytics platforms, Chatbase being one of them, definitely, can sort of help support, the wide variety of those data sets. So that makes
Yeah.
complete sense.
And by the way, we see that over 50% of bots that we do analytics for are customer support ones. So it's like
Really? Wow.
the most common use case according to our data.
Are you seeing like maybe like a second runner-up use case, in addition to customer support, or is it really sort of diverse when you start looking at the rest of the
Yeah.
data?
Beyond customer support, it's pretty broken up. But yeah, there's like the marketing use cases, and there's like e-commerce and things like that. But no clear second place category.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like there's still like a lot of, exploration and testing, even with some of these enterprise use cases right now. I think people are still trying to figure out, where does the technology properly fit in with some of these use cases? And then
Mhm.
once they see, a level of engagement, it's just like, all right, now can we actually drive some tangible, business outcomes at scale? So I think that's why platforms like Chatbase are really important.
Yeah, in general, I feel like it's early days for bot development, and it's hard today to build a good bot, and the market needs to help the developers by providing the kind of tools that we have for websites and apps and make it really easy to build those.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So, what were like maybe some of like the initial successes when you guys were building the platform? Maybe it was like a pilot customer or a group of pilot customers that you guys started, sort of looking at that, and they were leveraging the data. And it's like, man, this is actually working out really well.
Well, with our second product, the virtual agent modeling, um, yeah, we were working with like a Fortune 100 company, and they said after doing like an initial engagement that this way of building bots using like modeling of historical conversations is 10 times faster than their existing way. So instead of like sitting in a room trying to think about what to build and coming up with training phrases, getting thousands of training phrases day one from your call center data, and modeling the conversations based on how people really talk, move them much faster, and it doesn't require like over time getting to that kind of optimal conversation structure. So so that was really cool to like hear that from a CTO of a Fortune 100 that's like 10 times faster to use data. So that's for our new service. For the analytics service, the one that we've had for over 2 years, the big insight there came when one of the largest retailers had a team of people fixing bots. And then once we turned machine learning on to suggest fixes, they're like, oh, okay, we just need like one person now. Because this is actually more accurate. What they found was as bots like grow and get more and more intense, it's hard for a human to remember all the intents in their head. Like imagine trying to come up with like 200, 300 different intents and correctly fixing use cases. So at some point it just becomes like not manageable, and machine learning really does a better job.
Yeah, and I think that's like a pretty large obstacle that I currently see in the space, right? It's just like, okay, now we create these experiences, but how do we now do them at scale, right? Not only to hundreds of millions of people, but also as the depth of complexity of that bot sort of grows, that's a very valid point, right? It's like you can have a team of like 20 guys, or you can have, an analytics platform that can sort of address those things and, be prescriptive about some of these things.
Yeah, exactly. And
Very
unlike
cool.
websites and apps where the input is like understood, like a tap or a click, you know what the intent is.
Right.
It's so open-ended with bots, and it just makes the problem like less manageable. Like it doesn't. Yeah, it's hard to put enough people on it because it's so open-ended.
Yeah, I think that's the interesting thing about conversational user interfaces in general, right? It's like you think about like language in general, right? It's been around for like hundreds of thousands of years, but it's almost like, we sort of lose understanding, at very nuanced levels, right? So it's either you sort of go down to like these like little building blocks of bricks of language, or you just sort of can look at large data sets and sort of can look at sort of what are the prototypical, most effective ways, and then make those things more efficient at that level. So I think that's something that we see quite often right now, just within the first couple of years of these things gaining like market visibility. So
Yeah, sure.
it was very interesting. So can you maybe also talk about, conversely, what were some of the initial challenges? I think moving into sort of an emergent space, there are always challenges, but they are always learning opportunities from that, but at the same time, what you were alluding to previously, we've seen this sort of similar cycle with, web as well as mobile, as far as, leveraging analytics platforms to make more compelling experiences.
So, one of the challenges is people don't know what they don't know. So they're building these bots and they maybe feel confident. That's like the first stage. If you're an uninformed novice, you think you can do it, but then they have to go through some cycles in production with their bot to realize, whoa, this is hard. So once they've gone to that place where they realize, they're aware that they're a novice, then you can offer them tools to help them. So yeah, so as the market, we were maturing with the market, and as the market realized, we need better tools, we were there to offer it, but we had to like wait for that insight, for them to have that insight. And we want to continue growing. But yeah, that's like an interesting thing when you have like a new type of market, you have to like make sure people know they need your tools.
Yeah,
So
no, that's a
it's
good point.
problem to have. Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah, because like the hype cycle, for bots, right? It got really high around 2016. Then, a lot of VCs were getting pitched these different, extravagant bots and platforms and, different tool sets. And then we're sort of sitting in that trial of disillusionment right now. And then I think it's sort of like the perfect time to say, hey, maybe there's a better way to do some of these things or a different methodology. So I think it's quite prudent, at this point. So I think it's just a fact of evolution of technologies, right?
Yeah.
Similar curves sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
So as far as the, maybe vision for Chatbase, right? Like today, I think we're sort of seeing like it's very nascent right now. Things are sort of moving forward, and, we're seeing some use cases that are very, very effective, right? Whether that's call center, or whether that's like sort of B2C, use cases with simpler sort of rule-based bots.
Yeah.
So what is like sort of the vision, of Chatbase as far as, not today necessarily, but like maybe in 5 years, if you can talk about that.
I would combine the vision for Chatbase with the vision for the industry.
Yeah.
Because I think they're in line, and really like I'm inspired by seeing like Hollywood movies and how people can just talk naturally to computers without having to filter themselves or worry like, did I enunciate? Did I say the right word? As we do today when we talk to computers. So my goal and vision is to like do away with that, let people speak. That's the way that our preferred way of communicating. It's not clicking and tapping, and have computers like understand them and work with them. And we're finding that conversations are messy and complex, and they can go off on tangents, and there's all kinds of one-off questions, but all that can be understood and modeled if you look at real conversations between humans. So yeah, long story short, make bots human-like.
Cool. No, I love it. I mean, Google, I think definitely set maybe like the future precedent with duplex. So, maybe one day soon. Right. So
Yeah.
I think we all have fingers crossed over here on my end, but, no, yeah, absolutely. That makes complete sense. And I think we're all sort of waiting for that idealized vision to occur, hopefully within the next several years here.
Yeah.
Um,
And I would say also that it takes a lot of effort to get to that level of
yeah.
understanding, and that companies need to understand that it's a multi-year investment
Yeah.
in narrow use cases
Yeah.
that will get them there. What I'm finding often talking to like enterprises is they want coverage. Can I
Yeah.
get like coverage across all my conversations? And they don't think so much about quality or depth of those experiences. They just want, I can automate 56% of my calls. But I think that the right way to think is like, let's do 10% and go
Yeah.
really deep and make it really good, really expert kind of conversations that meet the needs of customers, and then move on to the next set. But yeah, I think like depth first versus like breadth first is like a good strategy.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. And it's almost like when mobile apps came out and everyone needed an app, right? It's like, it's oftentimes, it's just so interesting to sort of look at the pattern of technologies that come out, right? It's like oftentimes people are so enamored by technology that we sometimes forget that it's just like, okay, well, it's the practical application of the technology that drives the business outcome, not the other way around.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see, some of the largest companies have these very broad chat bots, and now, they got them out maybe 2 years ago. Now they're curtailing features, and now they're sort of refining and focusing on depth. And, it makes a whole lot of sense, just from an iterative standpoint, right?
Yeah, because when I try some of these out, they misunderstand the user,
Yeah.
they don't support key functionality, and they miss opportunities to help the user, in cases where they already have, let's say, the intent, but they didn't understand that way of saying it. So there's all these like broken experiences, and that doesn't help anyone.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
it's just like any other experience, right? So if you have a bad experience, right, it's difficult to sometimes get those people to come back for a second time, right? So it's like being very diligent for like those very narrow use cases and saying, how do we build these out in such a way that they are robust enough that can address this one or this percentage of problems very well.
Yeah.
And even simple things that we take for granted for in conversations, right? For example, we could be talking about bots in this minute and then change the conversation and be talking about, just like different destinations to travel to. In this conversation, it's very easy for us to maintain state, but chatbots, on the other hand, you throw a non sequitur at it and then it oftentimes just does not work very well, right? And even conversations as simple as ordering pizza, it seems very simple, but there's a wide variety of complexities into that. So
For sure. Yeah.
yeah,
And
so
people often like to just tell their stories on these calls, not related to the transaction.
yeah.
And what should bots do there? Like, and one day they should, I think, also support the need to connect.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's actually like an interesting use case that bots are like specifically they're good at doing, right? We look at like something, Shout Ice,
Yeah.
that Microsoft's been working on for some time. And it is that sort of social nature of compelling people, at 3 a.m. in China to be talking to this bot. They know it's a bot, right? So
Yeah.
it's that's definitely very, very interesting to see where that sort of leads to. So, sort of bringing this full circle here. have you used a chatbot or a voice experience that you have found very, very compelling or just good at
Yeah.
doing what it is? It doesn't have to be broad, it doesn't have to be narrow, but just in your opinion.
Yeah. Well, I have like 3 and 6 year old boys, and it's interesting for me to watch them interact with Google Home and just see like how they phrase their, phrase things and kind of questions they ask. So I like that's like general purpose, but I'm also, even that as advanced as it is, still is working on having the person not filter how they phrase things. We have it connected to the TV, and so they often say like, okay, Google, play Ninja Turtles on device TV. That's what they have to say. So I'm looking forward to like the day when it's a little more natural kind of speaking, and it will come. But yeah, so I just enjoy watching them doing those kind of interactions. I think like kids today will be growing up with that being part of their daily experience. Like they won't know a world where you don't have like a smart assistant you can just talk to, and it'll just get better. So anyway, just like observing that is fun for me, and I see like artful kind of exchanges, where it was done right. And sometimes it doesn't work, but you know, everything is
Yeah,
captured and it can be fixed.
definitely, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's just it's just amount of time, right? That passes from 2 years ago to the next 10, 15 years, right? It's inevitable, right? That these experiences will get much better, just predicated on the fact that we have access to more data and better tools like Chatbase that help us analyze that data and iterate our applications faster. So,
Yeah.
absolutely. So maybe talking about the current state of affairs or the current limitations within this ecosystem. Can you talk maybe a little bit about some of the current limitations, obstacles, challenges that you see in the space right now that we need to sort of work through, as developers or
Yeah.
people doing UX to get to that next level?
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a number of disciplines that need to mature. So one of them I've talked about is like using historical data to like
Yeah,
inform what you build. But there's also an art. Well, there's like an expert that knows the business that should be weighing in and deciding like what makes sense from the data, what makes sense to include in the bot. For example, a trend, something might be commonly happening between humans, but you want to keep it between humans. If it's, let's say, a complex sale, you don't quite want to give it to the bot.
yeah,
Other things are more like standard questions that are common, or complex questions are common but are less critical for your bottom line. You might want to automate. So there's like this expert that needs to be in the loop on bot teams, and then you need like the designer, conversational designer, in the loop as well to bring life to the conversation. What's the personality of the bot? What keeps people engaged? There's a lot of creativity that needs to go into bot design that a good conversational designer will be, and copywriter, like related skills, can bring to the table. And I think there'll be lots of those kind of jobs in the future, because there'll be lots of conversations to automate. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think you make incredibly valid points, right? Because it's like, first of all, just having the context and understanding of what are the current limitations of the technology, right? I think is really important, right? Because I think there's a misconception right now that hey, it's like Siri, it can answer everything. It's like, no, it can answer very compartmentalized use
Yeah.
cases that we have ironed out really good. And I think just the nature of that triaging, right? It's like, all right, what's going to human and
Yeah.
what's going to a bot? I think is maybe something that needs to be more well understood.
Yeah.
Just at sort of enterprise level. But I think it's just a matter of time, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot of thoughtfulness that needs to go in, and measuring of what's working, what's not working, and then making decisions. Um, you can try to automate some of the ones that you think only humans can do, and see how well it works, but do it on a small scale.
Yeah.
And it's maybe going to be like a multi-year project to get it to the right level.
Right, right. No, absolutely, absolutely. And then, your other point about user experience, right? I think there are a lot of classically trained, UX people with graphical user interfaces, but that, I think there are high level components of that do translate very well to conversational UX. But at the same time, I think there is this, cross specialization where we need to pull in copywriters and people from the psychology field and classically trained people in UX. And,
Yeah.
I think it's definitely an emerging sort of skill set and talent. Right now I actually only know, two people or two companies in the world that are actively sort of building curriculums around this.
Oh yeah.
But I think it's incredibly important, right? Because it's like we can't always just blame technology for everything, where people are saying, well, the NLP or the NLU or the state management isn't good enough, right?
Yeah.
At the same time, it's like, well, from a copywriting standpoint, what is the best way to direct people or encourage people or to convince people if it's a sales use case? So
To keep
it's
them in
very,
the conversation or convert them or yeah, whatever the action is. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And then, I'm also curious about like your sentiments or your opinion, your personal opinion around, just the current state of natural language processing,
Hmm.
and also sort of the other layer on top of that, which is just sort of like context and state management,
Yeah.
whether that be like short term or long term. And
Yeah.
what's your opinion of that?
So so I think that that NLP solutions are coming along and they're getting better, but you always should have data as well. They're not going to work well on their own. You have to see them with good data. So I think tools that help you get the right data and then the right designers creating the conversation. So it's like a set of things they need to have right. The NLP, as you said, on its own won't solve all your problems. But if you have a suite of tools, then you can get there. Um, and then what was your other question? Um,
Yeah. So also, I guess, sort of the context and state management
oh yeah, okay,
seems to
memory.
be a
Yeah,
huge
yeah,
component, right?
yeah. We see that being a challenge because it's not always clear. Like how far back should you keep things in memory, and um, and I think there's certain best practices that can often work, like where there's a main flow and then you go on one-offs and come back to the conversation. So we see like that kind of design working pretty well. So like the flexibility to answer tangential questions while being able to gracefully come back to
Right.
the major reason why the person called.
Right.
And then being able to take on another issue, major reason someone calls, like doing multiple of those on one call without getting confused. And sometimes aborting a certain flow because you realize, oh, that's not the problem we need to solve, and then you start a new one. So there's a few of these like design patterns that bot developers can follow, and it can take them a long way towards having a good experience.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm sure you guys are, seeing best practices, just having talked to so many people and looking at the data.
Yeah.
So I'm also curious, like, do you have any best practices, that you can maybe talk about, whether it's UX or development or
Yeah.
any other aspect of bot development?
So um, a lot of what I'm saying is in the context of contact center bots, which it turns out, like one side of the conversation is pretty scripted. Like the agent,
Yeah.
once the problem is described, has their way of like working through the problem. You know, that's how contact centers operate, and so that's a good thing for bot developers that there's like somewhat structured kind of conversations that you can automate. In other realms, like let's say therapy bots, it's a lot more open-ended, and that approach doesn't work so well. And another approach might work well. We do see that the highest engagement bots are those kind of like expert bots, including therapy ones. So there's a need out there for them. And when built right, they can have like highly engaging sessions. But there, I think the approach is different. It's about like open-ended questions and being able to like tease out insights from the responses and build on them. But it can't be as prescriptive as a contact center bot. And then marketing bots often are about gathering a few pieces of information. They're like lead gen. But those as well can't be dry like a form.
Yeah.
Why not just give a form in that case? And so there, I think there's a lot of like innovation happening around what it means to do like that well. And there's a little bit of like selling and answering questions and like being flexible and not just following, not just like asking for information from the customer, but also like answering their key questions as they're qualifying you as a business. Yeah. So different verticals require different approaches.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think, it can be highly contextual, and yeah, I mean, it is very interesting because I think, the biggest like cohort of use cases right now is definitely in customer support. So I think that's where, a lot of people, are seeing, these best practices emerge from. It will be interesting to sort of see what that sort of next segment is, whatever that may be that is emerging. Yeah. So
I do think like marketing bots, if anything, are going to be the next one. More and more we're seeing that mature. So before you had me pick the second most second cohort, and maybe that's it, the marketing ones.
Yeah, the marketing ones, it's interesting because, we see like this sort of division, where with customer support bots, we often see either it's, NLP or some sort of NLP hybrid that's walking them down some sort of rule-based bot, which seems to work very good. And, conversely, what we're seeing with, marketing bots is that a lot of them are primarily like these, rule-based bots through and through, and I think it's sort of like, when you're optimizing for conversion sometimes, right, all the successive steps and you sort of know what outcome you're trying to drive them to. So I've seen like the issue being that it's like, if it's NLP, right, and let's say they fall off into an edge case, how do you pull them back in like a graceful way? But it may be similar, obstacles that you see in customer support, right? How do you gracefully pull them in from an edge case? So interesting.
Yeah, maybe there are a lot of parallels, but I think that don't do a marketing bot if you're just going to be strictly gathering information like a form. Because then use a form, it's easier.
Right.
It's less. It's easier to just like quickly enter fields and rather than wait for the turn. To provide information. So I think they need to be educational and informative, and that is a good reason then to do a marketing bot if they do that well.
Yeah, definitely. I think we're slowly like moving past the stage of like everyone needs a bot for everything, right? Yes. So fingers crossed, right? Because I have definitely used a couple of bots where I was sort of scratching my head, wondering like, this is taking me longer to use it on a bot than it would be to use like a website, right? So,
an example is, let's say with apps, when they came around, everyone wanted an app. But there's only like 8 apps we use. So you're not going to have your local pizza shop have a successful app. And so over time we saw, a lot of companies, big and small, realized whether apps made sense for their business. And same thing with bots, that's what happened.
Yeah, definitely. So in your opinion, I also want to, sort of hear from you, what is it that you're like most excited about, in the space today, whether that's like some sort of insight specifically from data that you've seen or just talking to different entrepreneurs and something that they've told you potentially.
So I'm personally excited about this vision to have like human-like bots become a reality, just because I'm seeing a path to that. Like I'm seeing that given sufficient data, and not every company has it, but some do, that you can really go a long way towards that vision. So, so I have a sense for how that can happen. There's a lot of problems still to solve, and it's hard. The way people talk, there's so many nuanced things we do that we don't even realize, and we're going to have to model that for bots. But I believe that's going to happen. There is a path to that, and it's going to be a pretty amazing experience. Like once these are out there, imagine like anytime you can talk to any business and get like the most expert support person in the world for that company talking to you, and solving your problems. Because as you know, like often there's quality issues. When you call support, you don't know if you can get a good agent that knows how to solve this problem. And with bots, that's not the case. They're gonna know. So I like that. I like having like knowing that eventually like problems will be solvable and quickly fixed, and I won't be spending half an hour on the phone.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think, I think there was a Gartner statistic. They said by 2020, like 80% of customer support related things were going to be not handled by a live person, right? So I think, in any, I guess like level of evolution of chatbots and voice, I think we're slowly moving towards that place where it's like, artificial general intelligence, whatever that actually looks like. But I think it's just cool to like sort of begin to see the building blocks emerge.
Yeah, there's like shadows of it emerging.
Yeah, right. It's like if you assume like any, percentage of improvement over time, right? It's just an inevitable sort of curve where it ends up at that place. So, I'm definitely really excited for it as well. But that's really cool. That's really cool. So also, for people that are just getting into the space or people that have been in the space, do you have any recommendations on like resources or books, that you've found useful for yourself?
There's this one conference that I really like. It's called the Conversational Interactions Conference. It's in San Jose. And why I like it is because it has industry veterans, people that have been working on conversational experiences for decades.
Yeah.
This industry has been around.
Oh, yeah.
And you get like that full perspective of, the problems that people that have been in this space for a long time have faced. And I think that's rare in this industry. So yeah, I would say like if there's like one conference that people can make, that's like a good one for learning. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. I've actually had the opportunity to speak to, some people who have been in the space for 10, 15 years. I'm sure you've definitely had a chance to speak to quite a few of them as well. And it's quite interesting, especially when you think about a lot of the platforms, a lot of the technology the platforms are built on, a lot of the research papers came from like the 70s and the 80s. And, but back then, storage, network, and compute were quite more expensive.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to sort of see these things play out. And, people in the research space, I've sort of had conversations where it's like, it's sometimes very difficult to take these insights and be able to commercialize them successfully. So, I think that is a very interesting perspective that I think a lot of people that have been in the space for 2 years, they see IBM Watson or any other platform. It's like, oh yeah, it just came out today, right? Or people have been working on it for 10s, 20, 20 years more. So absolutely. So, at this point, I just want to, give the floor to you. Where can people learn more about what you do, or where they can find you online or at upcoming speaking engagements? And also similarly, are there any sort of chat-based announcements that you want to make here?
Well, thanks for that. So, so we have this new early access program, and it's all about evaluating past calls into your contact center. We are looking for more partners to work with that can help us develop these tools further. People can go to chatbase.com and reach out about it there. So that's top of mind right now. Otherwise, we have a blog where we keep publishing insights from these kind of experiments that we run and work we do. So that's a good place to like look for that. We publish also like in our newsletters like what conferences we're at, so people can find out there where we're talking about all these insights.
Cool. Absolutely. I'll definitely be checking those things out as well. And, I'll be looking forward to hearing you speak at the Chatbot Summit conference in Berlin next month, the 23rd and 24th, I believe. So look forward to that. Before I let you go, I always like to ask all my guests, a specific question, especially, sort of navigating the waters in emerging technology. What sort of keeps you motivated or inspired?
So, I like hard problems. I like ones that, really like have a huge impact on the future. And I feel like this does, like in this particular space, as humans, we want to talk. We don't want to like use a keyboard necessarily. A lot of times we just want to use our natural way of communicating. So I'm really inspired by that vision. I want to make it a reality and sooner. And that is exciting. Keeps me going to work every day and enjoying the work.
Cool. I love it, Ofer. Hey, well, Ofer, I appreciate your time, and I look forward to hearing more insights coming from Chatbase in the near future.
Thanks so much.
Cool. Take care.
Okay, bye.